Hey fam, so I've been getting some DMs asking my opinion on Bridgerton Season 3, particularly Part 2. So here it is. Overall, I think it was a good season. Do I think there were some things that needed to be added or subtracted? Yes. So let's get into what those are. So, subtracted. There were way too many storylines, and I think it did take away from the main characters. I understand that their story was stretched out over 3 seasons, and so we do need to consider the scenes that they had together in season 1 and 2 and 3 to be part of their overall story. So I get that they could get away with less scenes in season 3, but it was their season and it was their season to shine. And it was, the season that Pollen should have been at the forefront. And I felt like they had either equal amount of runtime in this season, if not less than some other storylines, which honestly, I was really upset about. But what we did get, despite not getting enough, in my opinion, what we did get was absolutely beautiful. In part 1, people have been talking about how it felt rushed, how it felt like they didn't have enough yearning and romance. I'd have to disagree. I feel like we've had yearning from all the way from season 2 through the end of part 1, because you saw how he looked at her when he got back from his travels in part 2. You saw how he always sought her out at every, like he says, every social assembly. And in a way that was him yearning, but he just didn't realize why yet. I mean, the guy got upset, so upset, and hung up on the fact that she didn't write letters to him on his second trip out of the country. So for part 1, I think it was really beautifully done. I think it needed to show their friendship and their dynamic, and that's what they did for the first 2 episodes. And in the second 2 episodes, they really had him yearning and pining for her. And then we got the incredible payoff with the carriage scene, which I know Luke and Nicola were saying, oh, that's not even the best bit. That's not even his love confession. But we all know that those lines that Luke had in for the carriage scene are going to go down as the lines for the love confession. Like, just like Anthony's, bane of my existence, object of my desires, and Daphne and Simon's I burn for you. So, part 1, honestly, at first I felt underwhelmed, but then I watched it again and then I'm like, no, it's perfect. It really is perfect just the way it is. So, I personally love part 1. Now, part 2, again, watched it the first time, kind of felt underwhelmed and wanted a little bit more, but when I watched it again, I realized just how beautiful it was. Minus the fact that there was just too much going on with the other characters. I understand they deserve their time in the spotlight too, but that's why we have a season for each sibling, is for that. I get setting up things, and as seasons go on in most shows, you have to set up other characters. But I just felt like characters like Cressida and even Benedict and Francesca, their storylines were a little too detailed and a little too long. They could have gotten things across just as clearly without as many minutes being taken up by them and not given to the leads. Now, I'm a writer. I love writing. Um, I love writing scripts. I love writing music. I've always just loved writing whatever I feel is I'm called to write. So here's what I would have done a little bit differently in part 2 in particular. Overall, part 2 has great bones, in my opinion. But there were a few things that I felt were repetitive and unnecessary. And another couple things that I would have added. So it starts with the queen barging in at the wedding. So everything up to that point I really did like. Um the romantic, honeymoon phase of 5 and 6. Even, Colin being upset in most of 7. But the way he came around after, the fight in front of the modiste and talking with Kate and Anthony, you can tell at the wedding that he was past and almost over everything that had happened. Not everything that had happened, but at least what she said. He was kind of over that part. Yeah, he was still concerned, and, he was still worried about how to protect her, and, the jealousy was still there, but he was over what she said in Lady Whistledown. What really frustrated me is the fact that, the queen barged in and ruined this beautiful day. And not only did they do that, but they also did the Cressida blackmail plot, which serves the same purpose in the grand storyline. So why did we need both? In my opinion, it should have been written one of two ways. Either they should have taken out the whole bit with the queen out of her barging into the wedding and threatening the Bridgertons, and kind of left, the whole queen ransom thing in the background, obviously as a kind of a fire under this couple. And they should have just given, Penn and Colin a honeymoon phase. They should have, had a post-wedding honeymoon where they were, doing it all over their new house. And, from what I've seen online is we did have that. It was recorded. It was done, but it wasn't given to the fans in the final edit. So I wish they had just stuck with that. Why Netflix had it cut, I don't know. From what I understand, having worked in Hollywood, and having friends that work in Hollywood, it was more likely Netflix that cut it and not Shondaland and Jess Brownell. So don't go for Shonda and Jess Brownell. I know people are are upset with Jess Brownell, but I really think she did the best with what she was given. The second alternative storyline would have... to go off the first one. So they would have had the honeymoon phase, and then the Cressida blackmail plot would have, played out. And that's when Colin would have been like, hey, you need to give this up. Penn says no. He gets upset, sleeps on the couch, and then things just play out exactly the way they had played out in the edit that we got. The alternative of that is no Cressida blackmail plot. We do have the queen barging in. They don't get a honeymoon phase, but they do make up in that scene where he kind of goes in to get the blanket and he sees her in her nightgown. That could have turned into the legendary scene from the book, the stay scene, which is actually their first time in the book. But that could have turned into that scene, but with Penelope asking him to stay. And from there, we would have had them making up, and the next morning, Penelope maybe leaving ahead of Colin because she's still not sure if he's upset with her, but they did make up. So she leaves to go see her mother and leaves a note saying, I'll meet you at Fran's wedding. Then from there, we get exactly what we got and what was filmed. And, with the resolution of, him saying, hey, I read your letters and, I was reminiscing and I realized, you are Penn and Lady Whistledown, and I just never saw it this whole time, which honestly is the theme for Colin, that he just has never truly seen Penn for who and what she is. This is a 10-minute video, but I'm running out of time. Go to part 2.